They did not say her name when they decided her fate, because names carried dignity, and dignity was something they had quietly stripped from her long before that evening. Instead, she sat at the far end of the long dining table, hands folded tightly in her lap, listening as her family spoke in low, careful tones about the situation, about appearances, about whispers already creeping through their social circle, about how unfortunate it was that nature had been so unkind. And with every sentence, Elena felt herself shrink, not because she believed their cruelty, but because she had learned that silence was the only way to survive it, the doctor's verdict echoing in her mind, like a sentence carved into stone, unlikely to conceive, medically improbable. Don't build your hopes around motherhood. And over time, those careful words had been sharpened into a single cruel label that clung to her like a brand: infertile, broken, useless. Her sisters avoided her eyes as if infertility were contagious. Her mother stared at her, played as though looking at Elena might shatter the illusion that everything was fine, and her father finally cleared his throat and offered the solution with a tone that pretended to be reasonable but carried the weight of exile: a ranch far away, land owned by a widowed man no one ever visited, a place where she could be comfortable and out of the way. And there was laughter then, soft but unmistakable, the kind that disguises itself as practicality while feeding on humiliation, because what better joke, they thought, than sending the barren daughter to live among fields and animals and a man who had lost his own family. And Elena felt something inside her go quiet, not broken, not angry, just resolved, because in that moment she understood that staying would cost her more than leaving ever could. She packed one small bag that night, folded her dresses with hands that barely trembled, and when dawn came, no one hugged her goodbye, no one asked if she was afraid, and she left without looking back. The wheels of the wagon carrying her farther from judgment and closer to the unknown, dust rising behind her like a line drawn between who she had been and who she might yet become. The journey stretched endlessly beneath a wide, indifferent sky, the road rough and unkind, each mile stripping away the familiar until there was nothing left but open land and silence. And Elena found herself thinking not of what she was losing, but of what she had never truly been allowed to have: the simple right to exist without explanation, without apology. When the ranch finally appeared, it was not the place of mockery she had imagined, but something raw and honest: fences leaning from age, grass bending with the wind, a farmhouse worn by years of weather and perseverance. And standing near the gate was Thomas Hale, tall and broad, his posture rigid not with cruelty but with caution, eyes shadowed by grief that had long ago hardened into routine. And he did not smile or frown when he saw her. He simply nodded as though accepting a delivery he neither requested nor refused. And in that quiet acceptance, Elena felt the strangest relief, because indifference, she realized, was kinder than scorn. He showed her a small room, a place at the table, and a list of chores without ceremony. And the first night she lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, feeling both terrified and unburdened, because no one here knew her story, no one had expectations of her womb or her worth, and the land itself seemed to ask only one thing: work honestly and endure. Days blurred into weeks and the ranch claimed her muscles and her mornings, the ache of labor replacing the ache of humiliation, her hands blistering and then hardening as she learned the rhythms of animals and soil, the quiet satisfaction of fences mended and meals cooked. And Thomas spoke little, but he watched, noticed the way she rose before dawn without complaint, the way she stayed late to finish what she started, the way she hummed softly while kneading dough as if reminding herself that she was still human. And in the evenings they sometimes shared the same space without words, the fire crackling between them, two people shaped by loss in different ways. And one night, when a storm battered the windows and the wind howled like a living thing, Thomas spoke of his wife, of the child who never lived, of the silence that followed. And Elena listened with tears slipping down her cheeks, because grief, she discovered, recognized itself instantly, and for the first time in her life she was not alone in it. As the seasons shifted, something inside Elena began to change, subtle at first, a loosening of the tight knot she had carried for years, laughter returning to her voice unexpectedly, confidence growing not from praise but from capability. And at night she would sometimes press a hand to her stomach, not with hope but with a quiet farewell to the dream she had been told to bury, reminding herself that worth did not grow in the womb alone, that a woman could be whole without motherhood. And yet the body, stubborn and mysterious, had its own language, whispers of fatigue that felt different, nausea that lingered, a missed cycle she dismissed as stress until fear crept in alongside disbelief, memories of sterile rooms and clinical certainty colliding with a truth she was not ready to name. When she finally spoke to Thomas, her voice shook not with excitement but with terror, because miracles were dangerous, things to believe in when the world had taught you disappointment. And he did not accuse or doubt her. He only held her hand with a steadiness that felt like shelter and said they would face whatever came together, and Elena lived with the knowledge like a fragile flame cupped between her hands, afraid that a single careless breath might extinguish it, waking each morning to test reality again, to listen to her body, to search for signs that the truth growing inside her had not vanished overnight. And when the midwife came and confirmed it with calm certainty, Elena broke down, tears spilling freely, grief and joy tangled together, because the child forming within her was not just life but contradiction, a living refusal of every cruel label pressed upon her since girlhood. And Thomas removed his hat with shaking hands, memories of his own loss resurfacing. Yet instead of turning away from pain, he stepped toward it, placing his hand over hers, over her stomach, as though asking permission to hope again. The months that followed were not gentle but honest, filled with exhaustion and fear and moments of aching tenderness, Elena's body changing in ways she had been taught never to imagine. Each movement of the child startling her anew, nights spent battling the terror that joy was temporary and punishment inevitable. Yet dawn kept arriving, the fields kept waiting, Thomas kept showing up, and slowly Elena learned to trust the continuity of her days. She spoke to the child in quiet moments, whispering promises not of perfection but of presence and love, healing herself as she did so, understanding that motherhood began not in biology alone but in courage. When labor came in the hours before dawn, pain tore through her with relentless force, fear colliding with memories of loss, yet she endured, gripping Thomas's hand until the cry finally cut through the air, raw and undeniable. And when the child was placed in her arms, Elena sobbed with a ferocity born of survival, the past shattering in the face of living truth. The baby was a girl, small and perfect, her fingers curling instinctively around Elena's as if anchoring herself to the world. And Thomas wept openly, grief releasing its hold as new purpose took its place. And Elena named her hope not as a symbol, but as a truth earned through endurance. The ranch changed after that, not in structure but in spirit, laughter filling rooms long accustomed to silence. And when Elena finally wrote to her family, the letter carried no anger, only clarity. And when they arrived months later, faces marked by disbelief, Elena felt no triumph, only peace, because the power they once held over her had dissolved, replaced by a life built on resilience rather than approval. And she did not return with them, because home was no longer where she had been judged, but where she had been allowed to become whole. Standing with hope in her arms and Thomas beside her, proof that sometimes the place meant to break you becomes the place that saves you. If this story touched your heart, if Elena's journey from cruelty to courage moved you even a little, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because stories like this are reminders that labels can be wrong, destinies can be rewritten, and even the cruelest jokes can be answered by miracles no one ever expected.